Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. It is just Brandon again. So Gamby has driven to Texas to be with his brother for the week. It is Easter. I'm recording this on Sunday, Easter Sunday. Trying to get this out in time on Sunday as well. So those of you with next ads, like most of the civilized world, can adjust your ads as necessary based on the stupid things that come out of my face over the next half an hour or so. Obviously, happy Easter for everybody. I hope you guys had a good weekend. Unless you're listening to this weekend, then I hope you're having still a good day and are not in trouble for listening to the podcast instead of being with family on Easter. Shame on you. Anyway, starting off with grammar school, it's Linus Ullmark, not Linus. At this point, I feel like I should just give up on first names. This feels like Yanni Kuokkanen all over again. Kind of nailed the last name and just stumbled on the first one. But and considering we don't get a whole lot of first name reads from beat writers and from play-by-play announcers, it's difficult sometimes to nail down what the first name actually sounds like. But yeah, Linus Ullmark, which honestly I knew and had since forgotten, since I do my best not to watch Buffalo games, as I'm sure people even in Buffalo do. We've kind of, like we mentioned in the last episode, week review is sort of, I feel like everything that kind of comes about in this episode is tied to what happened last week. Our drop candidates, our short and long-term targets, even the schedule, given this season, it's all sort of tied to what happened last week. So I'm going to go ahead and skip that and move right into the injury report. It's unfortunately, as I'm sure most of you are aware, a fairly long one. But as far as people going out, but I'm going to make it so that I'll talk about sort of the Vancouver situation at the end. But first up, Ryan Getzlav is day-to-day with an upper body injury. We've got Ricky Rax day-to-day with an upper body injury. Michael Backlund is day-to-day undisclosed, although I think he's a game-time decision for the Sunday game, so he may be back by the time this airs. Anton Khudobin is on COVID protocol. Jake Ottinger has gotten back-to-back starts over this weekend, so that's kind of interesting. Not super interesting, but sort of interesting. Roope Hintz, he's just always on this list at this point. He's got to be the most frustrating player in the entire league to have rostered, especially in next day ad leagues. I luckily only have one share of him, but it is in my dynasty league, which is, I guess, if you're going to have him, a good place to have him because, he is showing that he is legit this season, so that's nice. But next up, Anthony Duclair, day-to-day with an upper body injury. Aaron Ekblad, unfortunately, is out for the season. He broke his leg. Apparently has multiple fractures. Luckily, from what I understand, it's not like a ligament tear. There shouldn't be anything that will be lasting damage apart from after the leg heals. So we should see a healthy Aaron Ekblad again. It's a shame, though. He was having such a strong season, and I think we're really seeing what Ekblad could look like, as he continues to develop into that offensive role that we were hoping he would get at some point. Matt Zuccarello is day-to-day with lower body injury. We've got Victor Arvidsson day-to-day with an upper body injury. Tristan Jarry is day-to-day with an upper body injury. Ryan Reeves is day-to-day with something undisclosed. And they've got some returners here. Alexander Barkov and Patrick Hornquist both returning for the Panthers. Alex Pietrangelo is returned. Vincent Trocheck is returned. Dylan Strome, Jason Zucker, Brad Marchand, who was really, I think he only missed a game due to COVID protocol. And then Mackenzie Blackwood also came back. He's only really on this. I think he played on Sunday, but it was, or maybe even on Saturday, this past Saturday. But he made it onto last week's out list, meaning we didn't know that he was back. So just for posterity, we're going to go ahead and list him here. And then, of course, it's more than half of all the players and as well as coaching staff and family members on the Vancouver Canucks have contracted the P1 variant of COVID-19, the Brazilian variant, which is significantly worse than standard COVID, which is something to be said just to begin with. From what I understand, it comes with addition to all the typical stuff you get with COVID, with the difficulty breathing and all that kind of stuff. It adds on vomiting and diarrhea and some of your more typical flu symptoms, which that's to say it's a deadly combination is kind of an understatement. It is literally a deadly combination. So, to step back from hockey for a minute and just wish the best for the Canucks organization. By organization, I really mean the individuals. So maybe the individuals, but and their families, that everybody comes through this and doesn't have significantly lasting impact. And obviously, we don't want any deaths. That goes without saying. But just that everybody is able to recover well, and this just becomes another unfortunate incident in this whole thing. But there's not a whole lot else to say about it other than it obviously has significant impact. I don't want to take away from how deep of an issue all these players contract and staff and family members contracting COVID-19 is. But this being a fantasy hockey show, I am going to spin it into a context a bit, because we do have to react to it on our side as well. So again, hoping for the best. I could honestly see this being the end of the season for the Canucks. It would have been a real long shot, even if they were all healthy, to make the playoffs at this point. And I think the scariest thing, not the scariest, but I just, what upside is there apart from apart from monetary? What upside is there to have them play at this point? That said, there is obviously monetary upside, and the NHL is a business, and the owners, put their pocketbooks on this. I know that, who has sympathy for super rich people, but they are not going to want to lose money for nothing. So it makes me think that I don't know exactly how the Canucks can recover from this and finish their games in time, but my guess, if they are going to do something and the players are a non-option because of lasting effects or whatever else, I have a feeling that they're going to be fielding AHL-ish teams at the NHL level. I don't know. This is just totally a guess. It's really, we're not going to know much until this coming week. I'm sure next, probably on 10 Takes and again on the next week preview, we'll have more information and we'll know sort of what's going on. I assume at that point we'll know whether their season is in fact done or partially what the going forward plan for them is and what their team structure is going to look like as a result of all this. But again, best wishes to all of them. There's not much else we can say from our side other than we hope that everybody comes out of this as healthy as they were prior to the pandemic. And that obviously stretches beyond just the Canucks to anybody that's been affected by COVID. We wish you all the best. Tough situation. Anyway, moving into drop candidates, Nazem Kadri, center, 73% he is not somebody I'm suggesting everybody drop. He is just on this list due to his bump from Power Play 1, which was not a huge portion of his points, but a lot of his utility. It gives him an extra way to put shots on net and play kind of his style that has been so effective for him for his career. Donskoy has picked up that Power Play 1 slot. It's to be seen if that's permanent. So this Kadri drop is not for, even in a 12-person league, I wouldn't really be considering it unless you are desperate. If you're in a position where holding on to Kadri puts you in, you're dropping starts or something, or puts you in a position where if he continues, he hasn't been super cold. He did get a couple assists in his last 3 games or so, but I assume that he has a point drop coming, and he wasn't the strongest point getter in general. So especially in points leagues, I'm actually surprised he's 73% owned. In Cats leagues, he does put up a lot of PIMs and does some hitting, so he has some utility there. But 73% seems high for him, and he's not a player that would be at the top of my list of must keep or anything like that. Similarly, we have Matt Dumba on defense, 45%. Minnesota has finally seemed to be putting together some sort of Power Play 1, which includes only one defenseman, which is fairly new for them. And that defenseman is not Dumba, which is what you wanted to see. That's kind of the Dumba that we were expecting after his 50-point season, is a Dumba that gets Power Play 1 time all the time. And that's not what we're getting. And I don't see it changing. If it does, it's all experimental over there with their power play as they continue to work things and find some mesh with their team. They're winning well enough, but it still seems like their offense is inconsistent, to say the least. But and lastly here, Capo Kakkonen, also on Minnesota, 61%. There's no reason for him to be that high anymore. Talbot, it's clearly his show. He's starting a vast majority at this point and is just playing it phenomenally. There's no reason, apart from getting his reps in, that they should be starting Kakkonen more than they are. So that's kind of my take there. Moving into long-term targets, I'm going to leave Jason Robertson on here. He's 32% at this point, left wing only, but he's still only 32%. He's producing like crazy. We see him as a potential point per game player rest of the season. He is going to be a pivotal individual on that team going forward as Dallas continues to prove that they can get themselves a playoff berth, but also just in general. We're talking season upon season. Man, has he grown a lot this season. It's really exciting to see what he's going to do going forward. If you're in a dynasty league or a deep keeper league, even a medium, like a keep 8 or so, I would be targeting him, seriously targeting him. Next up, Alex Wenberg, center left wing, 13%. I think he's going to get a little bit overblown because of his hat trick and his goal scoring lately. He's not really much of a goal scorer, all things considered. I think that we're going to see him kind of revert back to being his typical decent point getter, but an assist guy with low peripherals. So this is a points league play mostly. Again, I expect his goals to drop off, but because of Hornquist and Barkov coming back and Wenberg continuing to stay on that power play 1, which honestly is a little weird to me. I would have expected that to go to Verhaeghe or something, but it is what it is. It looks like Wenberg is that extra man that replaces Ekblad. It's interesting for him because we know how good that power play is, and they still have an excellent quarterback in Keith Yandel. So Wenberg being a part of that power play is good news for him. We'll see how long this long-term hold really is. As soon as he's off that power play 1, I'm no longer interested. But he's definitely worth a look at this point. So on the flip side of the Matt Dumba equation, we've got Jared Spurgeon, only 25% rostered. He is playing power play 1 minutes. He has been on a little bit of a heater as well. I mean, a heater for Spurgeon doesn't really mean much past maybe a 50 to 55 point pace. But a Spurgeon at 50 to 55 points, he's already one of the best real-life defensemen that there is. To see him getting more of this offensive role is really good news for fantasy. And I'm actually surprised considering how many defensemen that produce less consistently than he does are still so highly owned in comparison to Spurgeon. So I think we're going to see Spurgeon start moving, and you're going to want to be on the front of that if you have use for him. He's not the biggest peripheral getter, so there is that. But I think the points are going to be. I think he's a good points league play, and he should be more owned or rostered rather than Dumba for the most part. Dumba has a little bit more utility as far as blocks and hits and stuff, but Spurgeon for points leagues and points. Yeah. Next up, Kirby Dach, center, 24%. I think he was overhyped. There was a lot of like stash talk around Kirby Dach and all that to start the season. I do like that they're playing him 19, 20 minutes a game or more. He's playing finally on that line with Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat at even strength, also on the power play. He's got like a point or two. He hasn't really shown it too much. I would like to see him shoot a little bit more, although I think he got a decent amount of shots in his last game. But if he starts to show some consistency, considering how widely known his name is for being such a young player, I don't think he's going to last on the wire that long. So he's one of those players that if you have room to gamble, you might want to hang on to him just for a little bit and see what it looks like once he gets settled in with that line. But he's not somebody I would grab if you're a bubble team or something like that. Next up, Jonas Donskoy. He's on here. He's 55% rostered, so it's a little bit out of range for most people, but he's on here because I think people are going to be they're going to have very short leashes with him. And he's still rocking power play 1, which is a big deal in Colorado. And I'm still relatively high on him. 55% again. He's available in a decent enough amount of leagues. And especially this week, Colorado actually has a pretty decent week coming up. So let me take a quick look at the schedule. Minnesota twice, Anaheim twice, but 3 off nights. So interesting. I think that he could put up some numbers during those games. Lastly here, I don't want to leave out anybody in deep leagues. And honestly, like, I'm surprised this player is still 0% owned, or rostered rather. That's Rudolph's Balsers. Uh, Left wing, 0%. He's playing on the line with Timo Meyer and Thomas Hurdle. He got a 3-point game recently. He's been shooting at least twice a game for something like 6 games in a row, maybe 7. So seeing his shots come up is good. His ice time is still like, it's at 15 to 16 minutes, but that's definitely higher than it was. So this is a deeper league play, but I'm surprised he's 0%. I feel like in some 16-person leagues, he should be getting looks. He does get some power play time, although not enough for that really to be relevant. But I think that line is starting to click a little bit. Maybe not so much Meyer, but at least Hurdle and Balsers. So might be able to see something from him at that super low rostered percentage. Okay, moving into the week preview. It's an interesting week. So there are 2 teams that actually have 5 games to play this week. And that's Boston and Philly. Boston's schedule is 3 Philly games and then one away game against the Caps, or 2 away games against the Caps, actually. And then Phillies obviously has 3 Boston games and then an Islander game and a Buffalo game. So despite having 5 games to play, Philly does not have an easy schedule except for that Buffalo game. But, it's 5 games. And this week is really balanced. And what I mean by balanced is the on nights, of which there are 4, and they are not the traditional ones. So when I say on night or off night, I divide that by if there are more than 8 games being played. Or rather, if there's 8 or more games being played, that's an on night. That means, half the teams or more being played. That means you might have bench issues. Those days are typically Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And actually, I said that it's unusual, but it's not. Those are the days this week as well, but also add in Friday. There are 8 games being played on Friday, so it barely makes the cut. But just don't ignore Friday when you're looking for players. The last thing you want to do is add somebody thinking you're adding a game or a start on Friday and realizing you actually aren't because you don't have bench space, or you don't have starting roster space. So let me take a quick sip. There's something that's interesting about running a podcast by yourself in that when Gamby's talking, I can take water breaks, and now I can't. There you go. You get to hear me drink water. Delicious Easter water. Anyway. So, everyone else has at least 2 games except for Vancouver and potentially Calgary. So I don't think they've officially postponed the games. Maybe they have, but the chart I'm looking at shows them still. I actually think they may have already been postponed. Regardless, it seems likely that Vancouver will have 0 games this coming week. And if that's the case, it seems likely that Calgary will have 1, and it's on Monday. So you're looking at, a stretch for Calgary, ignoring a little bit more of that situation going on with Vancouver, where they play 1 game in a week and have 7 days off. You'd think that they're going to have to move things around to keep Calgary playing more. Vancouver, it is what it is at this point, but I assume the schedule will be adjusted, so I don't really know what to think about Calgary players going into next week. I don't love it, but I imagine they'll play at least 2 games, maybe 3. We'll just have to see what those look like. And that could alter the schedule for some other teams as well. I think as far as players that are... So no day has more than 10 games played. So there's a good possibility that you go into this next week with no bench issues, which means there's going to be a lot of starts to be had this week, this coming week. Like, you could really maximize your start count if you're careful about the players that you add and drop. I would say that the Blue Jackets likely have the worst possible schedule this week, as far as, besides Vancouver, obviously, or Calgary, as far as like scheduled games. They play 2 games on nights against Tampa, and then a game on an on night against Chicago. Chicago obviously has been pretty good. Columbus, not so good, and you don't want to be playing against Tampa twice, and nobody does. So I think, like, if you're really, this could be the final week. In fact, in our listener leagues, this is the final regular season week, so it's a big deal. And you want to make sure that you maximize your starts against whoever it is you're playing. So I think if you have if you have Blue Jacket players, even the good ones, even Bjorkstrand and whatnot, I don't think there's a good reason to hold on to them if you are going into this week and it's a make or break for you, which it is for a couple of my teams actually. So I'm gonna have to take that to heart and decide what I'm doing with any of my Blue Jackets, of which you shouldn't have many. Let's be honest. Okay, short-term targets. Nick Ritchie is still right there as one of my favorites. He's only 15% rostered. He's kind of on and off that top power play unit. It seems like he and Krejci sort of cycle in and out, even though they play completely different roles. So I have not watched the Boston game to see what this cycle looks like, but judging by ice time, it seems like they play Krejci in with McAvoy, and then they play Ritchie in with Grzelcyk. Krejci tends to kind of patrol the blue line with McAvoy, so that is probably why. And he's got that lefty, I think he's lefty, to go with it, which is what they're getting from Grzelcyk. So it makes some sense that if they want to put McAvoy on top power play, that Krejci needs to be there to support him because they seem to like a left shooting blue liner. Either one of them are good. I like Ritchie more for Cats leagues. I like Krejci more for points leagues, as I think he's more of a play driver, whereas Ritchie's a net front presence, bang it in type. So I think an interesting target for this week is dropped Flyers. It's hard to say which ones because a lot of them, they're still pretty highly rostered. I'm talking about Van Riemsdyk, Farabee, Hayes, even guys like Provorov, who's 90% rostered or something, which honestly is crazy to me. I know he's been shooting a lot, but I'm surprised he's that high. Anyway, anybody that's been dropped of those types, despite them having a difficult situation, start count is a big deal. It's always going to be a big deal. So I would look at targeting some of them. It's funny because I almost had JVR as a drop candidate, but because I do think that basically all the Flyers are drop candidates. But when you're looking at a 5-game week, it's really tough to recommend that if you can play them in every single one of those games. So hard to suggest. Next up, Nick Schmaltz. He is 17% rostered, center right wing. Arizona plays against LA twice and then against Vegas twice, but they have 3 off nights, which is nice. Schmaltz he's probably the only him and Kessel, I guess, are heating up right now for whatever reason. Schmaltz tends to do this a couple times a season where he'll just go berserk. This time looks a little bit more sustainable than what happens when he typically does it, which is every time he shoots the puck, it goes in and then people go berserk. It seems like he's actually shooting quite a bit more than usual as well to go with everything else. I in typical Nick Schmaltz fashion, I don't really expect it to last, but I like him through those Kings games at least. We'll take a look at what happens after that. And then lastly here, I've got Jake Odinger. He, if Khudobin is out longer term, they clearly seem to be willing to lean on Odinger a little bit. Odinger, yeah. But, I do expect Dobby to come back sooner or later. So this is why he's a short-term instead of a long-term target. Similarly, despite the fact that DeSmith had a bad game on Saturday, I do think that while Jari's out, he's a pretty good ad. I think he's a pretty decent goalie. You look at his career stats. I feel like he doesn't get a lot of love for whatever reason, but I think he's pretty good. From what we've seen, apart from yesterday. But I think DeSmith is decent as well. I think he's something like 40-something%, maybe 50% rostered. So both those guys work out as short to long-term targets, depending on what happens. And that's basically it. This is your Easter Sunday podcast from the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Gamby is in Texas for the week. I think we'll be able to figure something out for at least Unsus. I don't know about the weekend preview. Probably. I would say probably for that as well. But don't expect can I point to this properly? Don't expect this. Yeah. Don't expect this. For those of you on YouTube, this to happen because we don't have the editing. Gamby does all the editing on this show. I don't have time, even if I wanted to. So there's not going to be, the fancy player names everybody yells at us about for not having. We try to do what we can on the show, but sometimes time gets the better of us, and that's how it's going to be this week. So don't expect to have be able to scan through and find who you're looking for. That said, I'll try to keep the website a little bit more up to date than I have been lately, and you can get to our scripts on there, or you can drop into Discord, and I'll try to do a better job of dropping our scripts there when they come out. But that is it. I hope you all have a great week. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Thanks for listening.